Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Annalisa and this is going to be about my favorite books by Black authors. I've been collecting a list for this video since about August of last year, and just recently I've been meaning to make a video for a while, so the list is now a bit longer than would fill up a regular video, so this might be a bit long. I am going to be pretty brief about each book because I have reviewed them before, because these are all books that I have read. But since it's Black History Month and a lot of people haven't been around to see all the reviews of all the books by Black authors I've ever read, I wanted to make a one-stop shop. I've also made a Word document full of these so that I can keep updating it, and also I will probably waffle a bit less in this video because I will be reading off my written reviews from that document rather than coming out of my head. Some of these books were also in my Best Books of 2020 video, so there's some real bangers on here, and I hope you find some that you can enjoy. I'm going to break this down by genre, so we have fantasy, sci-fi, poetry, nonfiction and memoirs, romance, and contemporaries. And I'm going to link this list below so you can peruse at your leisure and so that you can see it in the future when I've updated it with more books. So fantasy. The first one is A Blade So Black by L.L. McKinney. I'm slightly nuts about this one and apparently was about to start the sequel as I wrote this review, and I also really like the sequel. I actually think I like the sequel more because a bunch of new characters were introduced that were really awesome, and we learned a lot more about the world. So speaking of the first one, I really love the characters. There are about 9 important good teen characters, and they're introduced gradually and in enough detail that it's easy to keep track of them. A couple of side characters have a female-female romance that I found freaking adorable. It was also one of my very favorite tropes, so if there was a whole book about them, I would definitely read that. Our main character is understandable and fun while maintaining a bit of stupidity that suits her age. She's an upper teen, like 17 or 18. I enjoy her badassery mixed with emotional vulnerability because this is a story about killing nightmares, which are monsters that come from Wonderland, because this is a Alice in Wonderland retelling. The main character's name is Alice, and you fight them with these magical daggers, which is really cool. Yeah, I wrote down later on that the whole dual-wielding daggers thing is really cool. I also enjoyed the plot. There were enough twists and turns to make it really feel fleshed out. The world building was glorious, and the fight scenes passed with flying colors. And I have really high standards for fight scenes. I've read books by Tamora Pierce and R.A. Salvatore, and they are some of the people who write the best fight scenes, so I really appreciate it when I find other books that have good fight scenes like that. Overall, I really recommend it for fantasy lovers, especially those who like portal fantasy set in current day. It's definitely inspired by Alice in Wonderland rather than being retelling, because the plot is not based on it. It's very much the world building and the names of the characters and some of their placement, but I really like that because I really don't like the plot of the original Alice in Wonderland. Then we have one of the books that made my top books of 2020 list, which is A Song Below Water by Bethany C. Morrow. I loved the found sister relationship in this. The two main characters on the cover have this wonderful, strong relationship where they're very different, but they care so greatly about each other and are always talking to each other about everything. One of them is a siren who can control one person at a time with her voice, and one keeps having magical things happen to her with no good explanation at first. She doesn't know what's going on. A lot of the story is figuring out what's going on with that. There's also a gargoyle that sits on their house, Locust, who go to their school, and sprites causing mischief everywhere. There's a large discussion of how the girls' race and gender affect their place in the world, as well as sirens specifically being feared and abused, because they can control people with their voice a little bit. There are also other powers that sirens have that are also very cool. And I really like the balance between real-world politics and the girls' magical lives. Some reviews have said that there was too much real-world politics and that it overtook the story, but I really felt like it was very genuine and integral to these girls' lives in a very natural way. And some more from the top 10 list: Trail of Lightning and its sequel, Storm of Locust by Rebecca Roanhorse. These two books catapulted Roanhorse to the top 10 of my favorite authors list, being about a monster-hunting DNA woman who has to deal with a sudden influx of business when supernatural forces start screwing with her people. She meets Cat with a capital C and Coyote with a capital C, and a cult leader who can give people locust wings in the second. The style of writing combined with the personality of the main character and her relationships with also awesome side characters really did it for me. There's like 2 awesome side characters in the first book, and then we get introduced even more in the second book, which is really awesome. And yet another top 10, probably because fantasy is my favorite genre, The Good Luck Girls by Charlotte Nicole Davis. Like Trail of Lightning, my enjoyment of this one was definitely partially a personal taste thing. With me highly enjoying vigilante type stories set in rural, low-tech, Wild Westish type settings, or post-apocalyptic in the case of Trail of Lightning. These 5 good luck girls start their adventure by escaping a welcome house, which is a sex trafficking brothel. And while these topics are mentioned, sex trafficking, abuse, slavery, I found the low detail, mainly off-page handling of those portions, especially the sexual ones, help me not to over-identify with the characters, which can be a problem for me with over-empathizing. So if you have a problem with over-empathizing, read carefully, but this one might actually be okay for you. There was also a lot of female-female bonding, both romantic and platonic. There was dealing with addiction and PTSD, and also looking at caste systems and sexism through an otherworldly lens, which is one of the things I really enjoy about both fantasy and sci-fi, that they can do that. And on the fantasy side of things, there were 3 different types of ghosts, some that were benevolent, some that were ambivalent, and some that were outright nasty. There were magical rocks that made them go away, that you could carry around with you, or that you could hang around if they were too big to move. And then there were these mind-manipulating sorcerers. Then Dread Nation and Deathless Divide by Justina Ireland. I absolutely adored Deathless Divide. I liked Dread Nation quite a bit, and this was when I discovered I actually like zombie stories when they're written by women. In the past, most of the zombie books I encountered were written by men and were just not my thing. But these ones had all that action that I really liked from the zombie video games I played when I was a kid, with the hack and slash of the zombies and the running away and the getting the supplies, and also had really cool characters and relationships. And it dealt with a couple of things like the main character not liking the secondary character because she plays off the fact that she is somewhat white passing and also being very feminine, so there's a little bit of the not like other girls thing that is addressed. It looks at both sexism and racism and what would have happened if neither party had won the Civil War, if just zombies had broken out from all the dead bodies lying around, and the war had to be called off, and the strange ways that the North and South views on race and slavery were reconciled with each other. And it was really interesting. And then in the second book we get lots of plot twists, lots more world building. We look at revenge versus justice, and we look at how do you stop a monster without becoming one. And it also turns from one character being the main character and another the side to being dual perspective, both main characters. And that's when, of course, the second main character, who is Arrow Ace, really shines. And I really enjoyed that aspect as well. You can probably tell I haven't done the written version of this review yet. I'm going to do it on Instagram and then copy and paste that from there to my Word document, because I'm doing a series on Black authors on Instagram as well, and I don't want to have to write it twice because I'm lazy like that. But anyway, on to sci-fi. An Unkindness of Ghosts by River Solomon. I first became interested in this book because I heard that it had autism rep. It was on all those lists. The main character is autistic, and I really love that representation. It was portrayed as something that neither made her as a savant, despite the fact that she is brilliant, nor as a crippling curse, which is the 2 types of rep we tend to get in media. I found a lot to relate to with her. This book also has a fascinating exploration of gender and society and stratification of society, caste systems, with different levels of this space station that correlate to race and social status, and also each have their own unique cultures, and a lot of those look at gender in their own specific ways, and that's talked about and explored because the main character is someone who goes between all of the different levels because she is a maintenance worker and also a healer. So there's a lot of trans and non-binary and genderqueer varieties of people on the space station. River Solomon looks into all of that alongside considering racism, sexism, slavery, class, education, and more, while also spinning a fascinating narrative about the nature of the space station and the main character's place in it. There are a lot of trigger warnings for this one, and When I emphasize trigger warnings, it's probably because there is sexual assault in it, or there is more graphicness, or it's more involved in the story. Like, I will list all trigger warnings for the books I review on Storygraph and also usually Goodreads, but if I mention them in like a video review, I'm probably mean that there's more of it. While sexual assault was not actively described on page, the main character thinks about it a lot, and it is made clear that it happens off page very often. Then we have How Long Till Black Future Month by N.K. Jemisin. I love this book the way I tend to love N.K. Jemisin's work. The prose is amazing, favored by the fact that I was listening to an audiobook and they had different narrators for every story, because this is a short story collection of Afrofuturism, and also I always love her world building. It took me to faraway places and times in a very vivid way. I also managed to connect with every one of the main characters, which is rare for me in a short story collection, and it's a really great taste tester for a lot of different types of Afrofuturism. It's got space operas, alternate history, steampunk, dystopian, if I'm remembering correctly, and utopian. The first one I think is utopian, which was very interesting because I've read very few utopian stories. Also, the foreword made my author heart cry. It was very emotional. And one that I just finished is The Way to the Stars. It's about this girl who is a misfit because of her race and socioeconomic status, mostly in a mostly white middle to upper class school. She is an orphan along with her brother, and they are taking care of a baby who is her brother's child, and she has columned together a group of misfits around her from school who she just saw being sad and was like, I will be your friend now. And this is the story of her doing that with another new girl at her school who has moved here to get away from the big city because she is very famous and has nasty journalists following her because her mom was a uninaut, which is someone who went with a private company off into space on a deep space mission that she's not going to come back from because they're going out past Pluto. I really liked the whole misfit group thing. I love that trope, and I really love characters who go out of their way to just be friends with somebody who is upset just for the sake of helping them. And I really loved these two characters' relationship. It is also a female-female romance, and there's lots of stuff about stars and going to space and thinking about why you would make the decision to go on a deep space mission when we don't have the technology to come back, and what it would be like to spend your life off with only like 20 other people. It was a lot like a warm hug of a book. It's mostly contemporary, but it has these sci-fi elements because we're not to the point where people are able to send people on deep space missions yet. So there's a little bit of sci-fi with that, but it mostly feels like a contemporary because it's mostly about these girls' lives at school and their mental lives and figuring things out together in relationships. And that's something to remind me a lot of a book I'll talk about in a moment called This Is What It Feels Like. It feels like a warm hug of a book that, while it has sad things in it, the way it talks about those and the way it processes the emotions of the main characters and how much they love each other and take care of each other and are with each other through thick and thin, and also both of them involve raising a baby that you had in high school. Then we have poetry, which is a very short section. I have I Shall Not Be Moved by Maya Angelou, and this is a 49-page poetry collection. There are actually only a few poets I've read, not that I've read all that many, but you know, a few in school and then outside of school, whose words I can read in my head, and they, even though I'm reading them in my head and not having them read to me, they come out really lyrical and nice sounding. Some poetry just sounds choppy when I try to read it to myself. But Maya Angelou is one of those people who I can really picture how her words are supposed to sound by the way she writes them. The titular poem was my favorite, but I also really enjoyed the one about different types of men, good ones and bad ones. That was really good and really helped me figure out my thoughts on that. And it's not a huge investment, it's quite short, but it was just really nice and had a lot of really interesting and helpful thoughts to me. Then we have the non-fiction and memoirs section, which has a couple of books that I haven't written the reviews for yet. One of them is Eloquent Rage by Brittany Cooper, and that one I listened to on audiobook, and it was really nice because it just felt like somebody telling me about their life and their story, like they were really there and like it was a regular conversation. And she addresses white feminism, she addresses black men's sexism, she talks about the strength of her relationships with other black women and how they give her real talk, I think it's called, and are really helpful when she needs to hear something that's not that pleasant, but are also super supportive and loving. And she just talks a lot about her own experiences, and it was really informative while also not being dry at all, and felt very down to earth and real and not theoretical. Then White Rage by Carol Anderson. This one was a whirlwind trip through the history of America, and it's all about how white people react to black people having any kind of personal rights, basically, with a lot of rage. And it was really informative. It's a lot of stuff that should have been taught in school, but it wasn't. Like, I was taught how bad Reconstruction was and how racism didn't go away and people in the South were treated really badly, but like I was not taught how it was also really bad in the North and how structures were set down to keep black people from ever achieving equality. So this is really informative. It was a fast read for how much information there was, and sometimes it felt a bit jumpy from topic to topic, but that made sense for cramming this much information into a relatively short book. I also really like how many references it has in the back, so you can go look up all this stuff, and if somebody says no, that's not true, you can be like, ha, look at this. Then we have 12 Years a Slave by Solomon Northup, and this one is once again something that I wish had been taught in high school, information that I wish had been taught, or even a classic book I wish had been taught instead of something stupid like Old Man in the Sea. I hate that story so much. And I read this in college, so at least that was like some structured school decided this was worthwhile information. That was a really good class where we looked at, instead of a textbook, a bunch of primary sources that textbooks are written based off of, but obviously when history books are written, they do it with their own perspective and decide what to put in and what to leave out and what emphasis to put on things. So we got to read their sources, and that was really helpful for discovering a lot of things that I didn't know before. Solomon Northup was a free black man living in pre-Civil War America who was kidnapped and sold into slavery while he was in the city. He normally lived, I think, in the country, and as the title suggests, he spent 12 years as a slave with various different landowners, the last one being the most brutal. It describes how he lived during those times and also how he escaped in a lot of detail, and those details were really informative. And like, I had the basic idea of what slavery was like, but not a lot of the specifics, and this felt so much more real and personal because it was told in a narrative format rather than in a really dry textbook manner, and it was very personal instead of being like numbers based and, oh, this happened to people, that happened to people, this happened to Solomon Northup, and this happened to the people he was around, because it does actually look at how female slaves were treated, and I really appreciated that because he's a man and some men just really don't care, but he really cared. I really appreciated that. Then there is Becoming by Michelle Obama, written in a much different era and a much happier one. I admired her in a vague sort of way before I read this book, and now I admire her in very specific ways, and also generally like her as a person. Whether or not she had a ghostwriter, this felt like a very personal book, and I definitely feel like I know her a lot better now, and I also now understand why she doesn't want to run for president, because she actually really hated the whole being in the public eye thing. We get to see her experiences growing up, her college experience, how she met Barack, her many jobs as she tried to figure out what she wanted to do with her life, and we get to see what set her and Barack on the path to the White House and what it was like trying to change the world from there. And it was just really, really cool and inspiring. A good look at what things are like now for a black woman versus what they have been like in the past. On to the romance genre. Tempest by Beverly Jenkins, I've talked about quite a bit. It made me laugh so much. I really love this. I read all 3 books in this series. This is the last one. It's the Old West trilogy, and this one's my favorite, and you don't have to have read the previous 2 books in order to get it. In this one, the main character moves away from her family that the previous books were about and is setting off on a new adventure with all new characters around her. This one features an arranged by themselves marriage, which is really cool. between a forward-thinking lady from Arizona and a somewhat fuddy-duddy country doctor who's only getting married because he needs a new mom for his 6-year-old daughter, which I also really like. I'm a sucker for single parent romances, and this delivered on all the mushy feelings and the parent-child bonding, as well as a lot of hilarity stemming from the forward-thinking woman taking the traditional fuddy-duddy to school. Beverly Jenkins has written a ton more romance, both historical and contemporary, so if you end up trying this and like it, I highly recommend her other work. Then we have Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. This one I got into for the fibromyalgia rep, and it delivered very well. The rep and how it was handled was my favorite part. It was very visible and constantly there, which is how chronic illness tends to be, and it also wasn't treated like a burden by the love interest. I also enjoy artists and handymen, which the love interest is both of those. Personally, I don't get anything out of his motorcycle tattoos and leather jackets, but you might. And the heroine did. I love the way he and the heroine treated each other, took care of each other, and dealt with each other's old hurts, because both of them have had a lot of old hurts in the past, and I really like seeing them work together through those. Contemporaries, we have Dear Martin by Nick Stone. This one is about a 17-year-old black boy named Justice who writes letters to MLK to try to process the racism he comes up against in his life, and how he wants to respond to it, because he knows that MLK had a very specific pacifist way of dealing with these things. Since it tackles racism and police brutality, there are a lot of painful things, but overall it is a hopeful story. Character death always hits me pretty hard, and that was a part of this story. Grief was a huge component of the story, and I was thoroughly immersed. But somehow I think Justice's letters to MLK and the way he processed things through them helped me to process as well. On a lighter note, the one that I mentioned earlier is This Is What It Feels Like by Rebecca Barrow. It is a wonderful comfort read that I was very much not expecting, because I don't read that many contemporaries. It focuses on 3 girls ages 18 to 19 who used to be in a band together until teen pregnancy and another of the girls' alcoholism tore them apart. Now the teen has a sweet little girl and is graduating high school, and the alcoholic is in recovery, and their bass player is finally falling for the right girl. Once again, we've got serious topics covered in a wonderfully hopeful manner, with many touching moments and heaps of forgiveness and growth. And also the band figuring out maybe we'd like to get back together for this one special event. Then Bring on the Blessings by Beverly Jenkins. So she's mainly a romance author, but her scope is a bit broader in this book. It stars a rich black woman who got a giant divorce settlement from her cheating husband in her 50s and decided to invest it in a historically black town that has gone bankrupt and only has like 52 people in it now, and turn it into a haven for foster children and their parents. Fostering children is very special to my heart. And I found the depiction of that mostly accurate, if a bit rose-tinted. My only problem was the treatment of a fat child, with an emphasis on having him eat less to lose weight rather than talking about making sure all the kids ate a good, healthy junk food to healthy food ratio. Because you do need to like raise your kids to know how to eat healthily, but not in an instilling of fat phobia type way. Other than those very specific instances that were very brief, the fat character is treated well and like a whole person, not defined by his weight. So it was a fairly small thing, but it is there, so do be careful of that when reading. But overall, I really loved seeing all the relationships between the newly fostered kids, and also between them and their fostering parents, and also between this rich lady and all the inhabitants of the town that she's bought. Those are all really interesting and sweet. Then You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson, and this one was also one I wasn't expecting to like as much as I did, because once again, it's a contemporary. But I liked it a lot. It was highly recommended, so that's why I decided to read it. So good on you, BookTube. This is about a queer black girl running for prom queen, and I think she does it at first to make a point and also to hang out with this new girl who she develops a crush on, and eventually gets more and more into it, but comes up against some really nasty homophobia in her school, and also she deals with a lot of racism in her school, which is I believe also majority white, and it's mostly just a lot about her friendships and her relationships with her family, and there's some chronic illness in her family, which is really cool. And it's about the influence you have over the people around you, and the things you can accomplish when you have a bit of a voice that you get when you're running for something, and the messages you can send, like that it's okay to be a lesbian, and that the same type of people don't always have to win elections. So that's all I've got for now. I will keep adding to this list. I hope something you haven't read before has piqued your interest, and I hope you're having a wonderful February. If you'd like to leave an emoji, how about a fox? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!